Good morning, friends. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to lift our hearts above the concerns of this world, that we may live in the world, but not be absorbed by it. Rather, let us always remember we are children of the divine, sent here to share divine love and joy. Help us to be strong in the constant remembrance of our oneness with Thee. Om. Peace. Amen. Today is Monday, which we have lovingly called Money Monday, because I need to remind you that the work that I do and that a few others of us do here in the name of the masters we just invoked, is supported by your enthusiasm for it and your generosity. And your generosity has been truly impressive, and it has made many things possible. We recently had to reprint the Italian translation of the book Light Bearer, which your donations created in the first place. It sold out in 2 months instead of 12. Admittedly, it wasn't a large run, but still that was impressive. But because of your generosity, I was able to say to them, because the publishing company is a service. It runs like a business, but it's really just a service to get these books available. I was able to say, go right ahead. And they were able to keep all their orders, all because of you. I've been able now to start planning a little bit more travel, which incidentally, and this is like, it's like this is the good news and the bad news. Because of your generosity, I can travel a little more. Because I'll be traveling a little more, I won't always be 4 days a week on these broadcasts, but I will maintain as much as I can. I have some weekend trips planned, which usually kills Monday, takes Monday off the calendar, but the end point of all of that is, wow, we're doing a lot of good stuff, and I'm deeply grateful. You can sign up through Patreon, which is a website to connect creative people with resources to support them. You can go right through PayPal, Mission of the Masters on PayPal. It is now a tax-exempt religious nonprofit, and so your donations will also bring you tax benefits. You can do it just straight through PayPal or by contacting me directly. Go to my website, Asha Joy. Lots of ways you can do it, and very grateful for it all. Okay, I'm very grateful because it means that what we're doing is of benefit. And my gratitude is to Divine Mother for giving me such a meaningful way to serve. So when I say I'm very grateful to you, what I'm very grateful to you for is that we are able together to work for the light. What a privilege. Okay, we are working with a roadmap for right living, which is based on the 52 qualities that Swami Kriyananda speaks about in this little book, which is actually called Affirmations for Self-Healing, because every quality also has an affirmation. But I'm talking about more in this series, less about teaching you about affirmations than just simply having the fun, which I've wanted to do for years, of being able to go deeply into the meaning of each of these qualities. We're only up to number 3 because I am wandering leisurely through this book, and it's going to take us time. Number 3 is happiness. Success was number 1, love was number 2, happiness is number 3. When I started this section on happiness, I thought, well, there's also a section called joy. And I've tried to make a distinction between them, but quite frankly, Swami doesn't really make that much of a distinction. Joy and happiness kind of run together. But in our own way of thinking, we tend to think of them the nuances of meaning in the English language are a little bit there, but I was just confirming it. So in 33, 35, after we go through 35 more qualities, joy is 38. By then you'll have forgotten all about happiness. So we'll just do it again. I'm repudiating the thought that Swami makes a grave distinction, because he doesn't, as you'll see in just a moment when we do the affirmation. So there's 3 paragraphs that Swami has written, and we're on the last paragraph, which is just one sentence. Resolve strongly to keep this flame burning ever in your heart. I have to read the whole thing. Happiness is an attitude of mind, born of the simple determination to be happy under all outward circumstances. That's the definition of happiness, an attitude of mind. Happiness lies not in things, nor in outward attainments. It's not what you do or what you have, it's an attitude of the mind. It is the gold of our inner nature buried beneath the mud of outward sense cravings. That's such an interesting phrase, because if you think about gold, and you have a piece of gold, I have 2 of my rings are gold. If these rings were just buried in the ground and somebody found them many, many years from now, they might look like something had diminished the purity of the gold because it had been sitting in the mud or whatever it was. But as soon as you cleaned off everything that wasn't gold, you would find that the gold was untouched. And this is why the image is often used. We get very confused by the things and the attainments or the losses or the griefs or the longings, and we think that somehow our fundamental nature has been altered by those experiences. But the secret of self-realization and the secret of happiness is that happiness is the fundamental reality of who we are. In Sanatana Dharma, the definition of God is Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. And we are an expression of Satchidananda. Self-realization is to realize ourselves as Satchidananda. And what happens is, as we wash away the mud of all our confused ideas, we find that we are and have always been and will eternally be perfect gold. And that perfect gold is Satchidananda. It's an extraordinarily powerful idea. Even if we can't perceive it as direct revelation and live it all the time, the fact of the matter is, no matter how we may temporarily feel, when all of that temporary reality runs its course, we discover that we are the pure gold of spirit. In other words, we are not sinners who need to be redeemed. We are idiots who need to wake up. We are idiotic in our misperception. That's really not, that's not a parallel structure I just made. We are not sinners. We are actually blissful beings of light. But we've wrapped ourselves in a cocoon of ignorance. And when that ignorance gradually gets washed away, and it gets washed away by experience, things happen to us over many lifetimes. And we just gradually begin to perceive that when all the dust settles, and I come back to myself after having gotten confused and distracted, myself is a state of pure bliss. And yes, it's a little hard to recognize when we're in the hurricane, but it gradually just proves itself true. In meditation, devotion, service, these are all the ways we find it. And in the course of following this roadmap, we'll find all those things: devotion, service, sharing, generosity, moral strength, integrity. All of these qualities are the roadmap that let us get constantly, that lead us from delusion back into truth, which is bliss. When you know that nothing outside you can affect you, no disappointment, no failure, no misunderstanding from others, then you will know that you have found true happiness. And it says when, not if. And that's a very important point. It's a pretty big promise. Nothing outside you can affect you. That's a pretty big promise, but it doesn't say if, it says when. When we know that, because the heart is restless, as St. Augustine said, and until it finds its rest in thee, this is the prayer to God. The heart is restless. My heart is restless for true happiness, and it simply will not come to peace until I have conquered every shred of delusion. So Swami's, this is the roadmap. Now, this is an arduous journey in the sense that the delusion that if I just could have this one thing, then I would be happy. Master said that the satanic force, the devil, if you will, the shadow force draws us back to reincarnate again and again, not because our lives were tragic, but just the opposite, because it almost works. And because it almost works, we think, well, if I just tweak it a little bit, you know, if I could just marry Harry instead of George, if I could have just married Henrietta instead of Georgette, you know, then it would be fine. It was just a slight error. If I only hadn't allowed my parents to convince me to go into finance, but had followed my longing to be an artist, then it would have worked perfectly. If I only could have had children. If I only didn't have children. You know, just whatever it is, it almost worked. So we just keep tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And then finally, well, what Master says, the wonderful phrase he used, the whole game assumes a certain anguishing monotony. Anguish and monotony, which seem like contrary, because monotony just is boredom and anguish is intensity. But the repetition of it just becomes anguishing. And then we are finally willing to ask a deeper question. Wait a minute. Maybe the whole story is wrong. Maybe this whole idea that if I just get this or get that, then it'll be fine. That's what happened to me when I was young. I was intellectually capable. I wasn't really capable in a lot of other more important ways, but I was intellectually capable. And in the society that I grew up in the USA in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, if you're intellectually capable, you can go to school, you can go to university, you can go to professional school, you can be a smart lawyer, you can be a good doctor, you can be an academic, you can, you know, just do this stuff. That was the world I was in. I knew I could. Because it was something I'd done in past lives. I could, just like it was just a well-trodden path. And I looked at it, and I remember this, I can still feel this very deeply in my early teens, because that was when I began to, well, no, I was aware of it earlier, but it crystallizes then. That it's like each one of those roads, I was standing there and I could see it. I could see that I could walk that road and I would end up there. And somehow or another, my deathbed was always vivid in my mind. Not morbidly, but just the awareness that life would not last forever. There would be a moment when it would end. And I knew that if the end of my road was the one they were pointing me to, it would not, isn't it interesting? I can just feel it. My heart would feel it. My heart felt empty when I thought about it. Where did that come from? That's the anguishing monotony of having had the experience of trying it to the point where I had to think about an alternative. Nothing in my world supported that at all. So it was very confusing. And then as you all have heard me say, 19, I met Vivekananda's writings, through his writings. 22, I met Kriyananda. And they just told me something I wanted to know. They said, sure, you can follow that road and you'll be nowhere at the end of it. And that made sense to me. That's why I was meeting them and reading those books. So now Swami says, when you know that nothing outside you can affect you, then you will know that you have found true happiness. Oh, okay. Now that doesn't mean you can't go to university, go to professional school, become a wonderful lawyer, a fine doctor, a college professor, a businessman, a musician, anything. It doesn't mean you can't do all those things, because our karma pushes us to have those experiences. It just means we have to be understanding that we live from within. You know, the demographic of who comes to our Ananda temple, who gets on the path of self-realization, it's always been a little hard to determine. There are certain qualities, almost certain qualities, which is we tend to attract people who already have the capability of having some success in this world. We do not tend to attract people who are impoverished, who are trying hard to get a foothold in the material world. Because when you're striving to get that foothold, you still believe that if I could just get that foothold, then I would be happy. So you're not inspired by a teaching that says, oh, don't bother, it's not going to please you anyway. And you naturally think, well, who are you to talk to me like that? You have all this. You're telling me that I shouldn't strive for it. It's generally not karmically correct, that they need to develop the qualities to have that experience, because we learn from experience. We do not learn from being told. And this is the great tragedy of dogmatic religion, that people tell you that this is true, but then try to frighten you from having the experience yourself. You know, sensuality is bad, don't go there. You know, materialism is bad, don't go there. And so people just, like, as Swami said, they're not really pious, they're just afraid to sin, which is really quite different. Transcendence is when you say, yeah, I could do that, but I know it's not going to make me happy, so I won't. You know, suppression is when you feel that you're just going to go to hell and burn forever if you do it, and so you better not do it. It's not that you understand from within that the reason I'm not inclined is because it's a false promise. To see through a false promise is quite different than to feel that you'll be damned to hell forever if you cross a certain line. And you know, that's why sometimes people who have been too suppressed by dogmatism, whatever it might be, just boing way over here, and they ought to, because you have to know it. You have to be, Yogananda put it really well in one of his whispers. He said, it's not enough to be good merely because it's your habit to be good. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. It's not how you look. And this is how it was. I think it's from Jesus. I know it's from the Bible, and I think it's Jesus' words, you know. If you lust in your heart, you have already committed a sin, which is a really terrible thing to say. It just, you know, really puts people in a really tough spot. But there's a truth in it. There's a deeper truth that's not meant to just be moralistic, which is, it says it's your consciousness. And Gandhi put it this way, who was, you know, Mahatma Gandhi was disciplined in, you know, just extraordinary ways, and he documented all his experiments with truth, as he called it, testing out different theories. But he said, you must never give up a pleasure until you've replaced it with a better pleasure, which actually says it really well. In other words, if you really think that's going to make you happy, and you're only just not doing it because you're afraid to do it, that's not freedom. You have to actually understand the full measure of the happiness this will give you. When I was talking about love, which was yesterday's topic, or the topic before this one, I was saying everybody wants to be loved. And human love is wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful. It's just not it's not enough. But it is the means by which we learn perfect, infinite love. Master writes about it. He has this wonderful, I don't know if it's a poem or what it is, but it's something that you commonly hear. And he talks about human lovers promise eternal loyalty to each other, and the moon looks and laughs because we don't have the capacity to do that. You know, we die. We sometimes die unexpectedly, and we're called away by our karma into new realities, or even in the course of one incarnation, we make deep promises to one another, but we don't necessarily have the capacity to maintain them. And only the divine, only the masters can love us fully and unconditionally. And so thus we begin to understand that this dream of perfect love, whether to give or to receive it, comes when we expand our consciousness sufficiently that we are capable of offering it. And it doesn't mean that all our efforts up to that point should be scorned, not at all. We should cheer each other on and keep trying so that we can understand what that full potential is. So what we develop is not aversion. What we develop is far more subtle. What we develop is vairagya. Vairagya is a wonderful word. Vairagya means disinclination. Just disinclination. Just last night there was a concert in the local area, and I just heard about it from some friends, and included in the group of people who were performing was a very well-known, perhaps the most capable in the world, person playing the tabla. And I particularly love rhythm instruments, and I had recently had the opportunity, we had a kirtan here in our community with some guests of some devotees of Amachi and devotees of Anandamoyi Ma, primarily, including men who played the tabla just fantastically. And so, there's this concert, I could hear another tabla player. But I looked at the concert, and the tabla player was one of the players, and there were other players from other traditions, let's put it that way. And they put up some songs of what it would be, and it was like, I had a disinclination to expose myself to that concert. It wasn't that I thought it was bad. I was very happy that they were having it and all that, but I wasn't inclined. And see, that's what happens to us. We're just not inclined. We're not inclined even to allow disappointment or failure or misunderstanding from others. We're not inclined to allow that to take our happiness away. It's just not fair. I mean, it's not right, meaning it's not true. It's not sensible. You can make me weep with your bad actions, but making me weep over the disappointing nature of this world is not the same as actually allowing my happiness to be defined by it. And that's a subtle thing. I have a disinclination. We develop a disinclination for those things that we know are not really going to take us where we want to be. So Swami says, resolve strongly to keep this flame burning ever in your heart. And the flame he's referring to is the flame of true happiness. So how do you keep a flame burning? A flame burns out when you're not feeding the fire, when the fuel is run out. When, we use many candles on our altar, and we have a lot of votive candles, and we have these now they sell them, these little tea candles, you call them. It's this small amount of wax in a little plastic container, and sometimes our services or our meditations are longer than the span of that candle. And like in the middle of our all-day Christmas meditation, we have to remember to assign somebody to replace all the candles, because you'll go up there and you'll see that the fuel is simply burned out. And no one ever extinguished the fire, but the fuel ran out. So the fuel, the flame of happiness, the flame of true inner happiness, it will burn indefinitely, because true inner happiness is our true nature if we keep feeding it. But if we starve it, if we just let the flame burn out, it has nothing to feed on. And this is where satsang, service, devotion, or sharing, giving in the right way, and getting energy. I used to teach for many years. I mean, I've now been part of the center where I still live for 35 years. That's quite a while. And in the beginning, a decade, maybe less, I was giving a lot of the fundamental classes, and one of the basic classes we would give would be how to meditate, because that's one of the most powerful, that's a very powerful fuel to give to your flame of happiness. And people would be very enthusiastic about meditation. I would give this 4-week course, and the 4th class was always why you will quit meditating, because everybody gets so excited. And obviously the natural corollary was how you can keep from quitting meditation. You're all excited about it now, you think it's going to be great, but you have to feed that flame. And you can't usually. It's a very rare person who can just take the techniques, even get Kriya initiation, which is the words that we use to talk about, the sort of the most powerful method that we offer you. And you just take it home. It's a very rare soul that can generate sufficient fuel for that fire. We have to feed that fire. Nowadays, because we live in a hysterically materialistic world, just hysterically materialistic now, and hysterically outwardly oriented and outwardly focused, and believing that outward things are the key to happiness. And that's a very powerful thought form. And that thought form will just take you over unless you consciously, deliberately, with great energy, feed the flame of an alternate point of view. And so you need to be with other truth seekers. You need to be in the atmosphere where other people are affirming the truth that you want to live. Nowadays, I mean, here I am talking online, with people at a distance. Many of you are at a distance. This will remain on the internet, and I'll look at it a few months from now, and I'll say hundreds of people usually have watched things. I don't usually go more than that, but they accumulate. I look at the demographic, and I see, that they're all over the world. You have to keep the company of the vibration and the thoughts that you're trying to cultivate. You have to have satsang. You have to also give to that. Give money. When I ask you to give money, I'm actually, it's needed to carry out this mission of the masters, but it's also needed because we have to give. And if we're in person and can give our physical energy in the moment, great. If we're at a distance, or if what we believe in is at a distance, you have to give. You have to sacrifice. You have to make it clear that this is important to me. This is the fuel for the flame of happiness. I have committed my energy. I've committed my energy to that which is most important to me. That's what the flame is built on. And then when we commit our energy and get ourselves in that vibration, we begin to match the grace of God, which is always flowing. The grace of God is always flowing, but if you stand outside of it, that's is it Star Trek? They have that machine where you step into it and the beam comes down, the phrase, and I don't know if this is current culture or not. The operator of the machine was named Scotty, and you would say, "Beam me up, Scotty," and you would stand there, and then in the movie or the television show, you would dematerialize, and then you would rematerialize somewhere else. And you had to stand right in the beam to make that happen. You step outside the beam, it doesn't happen. And so we're trying to reform ourselves. But you have to stand right in the beam. And it's vibration. It's not physical, it's vibration. You have to show that this is what's important to me. If all our efforts come toward ourselves, we're just building a false picture. But if all our efforts go outward, that's why it's very powerful to give. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to have to finish tomorrow. But money is a very interesting thing to give, because we can talk a great story, but when it's time to think about money, that's when we begin to discover what we really believe. Now I'm going to stop in the middle of a sentence because I've opened up several ideas and I never finished the question of the demographic of who comes to Ananda. So, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. God bless you.